Sarcophagi are a common form of art amongst the Romans, just as they were amongst the Etruscans. And they tend to give us indications of what's going on in Rome at the time. So after Caracalla's death, we see civil war. We see the barracks emperors. So we see more than 25 different men being declared emperor. General after general is going to come in with their army, be declared emperor, and rule for a period of months frequently, and then killed by other generals who are coming in with their armies who have been proclaimed to be emperor by their militaries, by their armies. The Senate has basically no power, and things are very, very unstable at the time. So we see images like this, here a battle scene showing the chaos, the psychology of hand-to-hand combat. Now, artistically, one of the things that we're seeing here is a change in form. You'll notice that the heads are getting larger in comparison to the bodies. And that's because we're moving a little bit lower artistically. It's as if they've lost some of the peak elements of art that we saw amongst the Romans and the Greeks. We also see a focus primarily on psychology and philosophy. We'll get to philosophy here in a moment. But here, imagine hand-to-hand combat. You go in, you're wearing your armor and everything else. Whoever you're fighting, if you're Roman, probably doesn't have any kind of matching uniform. And as soon as the battle starts, as soon as those lines collide, it becomes impossible to know whether you're behind the enemy lines, or you're ahead of your own, or you're right along the line. You're covered in gore and mud and everything else. And so it becomes very difficult to tell friend from foe. It's an incredibly chaotic experience. And they're trying to explore that psychology here in this sarcophagus. These are, of course, major art forms for the Romans. We also see an interest in philosophy. We saw this in ancient Greece during the Peloponnesian Wars and after. That interest in sort of why humans make the decisions they make. What decisions should we make as society begins to not collapse necessarily, but ebb? Because societies go through ebbs and flows. And this is reflected in the imagery that's commissioned here, this idea of the sarcophagus of a philosopher showing off that he is teaching. And by the way, this is how lessons would have been taught at the time. Small groups, 5, 6, maybe 10 people following around a single instructor. The lessons taking place oftentimes in gardens, marketplaces in ancient Greece. Same in ancient Rome. They aren't always building school buildings for these purposes. And this would be more advanced education. This is not your average school teacher that we're seeing here. So it's very different. It also has indications of paint, as you see in the beard and hair of the man on the right, giving us this idea that these were painted, they would have been very bright. And again, they're showing status. This is a philosopher's sarcophagus. So he wants to show that he was a philosopher in life. That's the most important thing to him. And so it makes sense that he's going to want to be buried with that imagery.